Hello everybody, my name is Madalitso Juwayeyi, a young woman who grew up in Chisapo. Chisapo is one of the underdeveloped communities in the capital city of Malawi. Growing up, there was an initiation ceremony that was happening in my community. In Chichewa, we call it Chinamwali. Chinamwali takes in young girls from the age of 9 to 15 to teach them different things in a different way. I remember being a child and wanting to go for Chinamwali. I'll tell my parents every year, I want to go for Chinamwali. And my parents would always say, next year, next year, next year. But next year never came. And the reason why I wanted to go for Chinamwali is simple. Because when the girls are coming out of Chinamwali, there was money that they were given. And I wanted that money so much. But as I grew older, I realized that Chinamwali wasn't as joyful and happy as I thought. You see, at Chinamwali, girls were taken out of the community into the bush for 3 weeks. And the lessons that they were learning there were different from what I thought. At Chinamwali, the girls were taught how to please a man, how to aspire to marriage, and how to be better women based on how the community defined a better woman. I also learned later that statistics showed that because of the lessons that they were getting from Chinamwali, most of them would come out and want to practice what they have learned, making them more vulnerable to teenage pregnancies, child marriages, HIV, as well as sexual exploitation. When I first got to college is when I learned about sexual and reproductive health and rights and the concept of feminism. And I realized then that the no I was getting from my parents wasn't really them lying, it was a protection. And I remember being in class and learning about feminism and imagining my father who has raised girls and sent them to school. And I went home and I told my dad, I was like, Dad, you're a feminist. And my dad said, no, I'm not. What is that? But what he didn't know is that while he sent us to school, he was challenging systems that had so long made women to believe that they were less than, and they belonged in the kitchen and not anywhere else. And while I was lucky to have parents that believed in education, to have big sisters that had gone to university way before me, that acted as my role models, I realized that most girls in my community didn't have the same privilege as I did. So that birthed a dream in me. In Malawi, a dream is called Lotto. So my Lotto was, I'm going to be the role model for the girls. I wanted to be the big sister for the girls in my community. So when I finished university, I co-founded FACT Malawi, a youth-led organization that advances access to sexual and reproductive health. And our first funding came from the Bill and Melinda Gates in 2018. And you can guess what we did with it. At this moment, there was a move in Malawi where we were challenging cultural systems and different traditional practices. And when we got this funding, I was so happy to join in this movement. So our first funding was to change the curriculum for Chinamwali. We moved it from 3 weeks to 3 days. And we put in the concept of feminism and sexual and reproductive health into the curriculum. And we made sure that it was only practiced during holidays, so that no girl had to miss school simply because she had to go for Chinamwali. We also managed to partner with community leaders because at this moment the concept of sexual reproductive health was still new. So we had to train them and had to train the young people to also be advocates for their own sexual rights. And we were able to sign memorandum of understandings with 10 community leaders to change negative attitude of their communities towards sexual and reproductive health. In 2020, we had another funding from HIVOS. And with the HIVOS funding, we realized that while we were advocating for youth-friendly sexual reproductive health services, the hospitals weren't really providing friendly youth services. They were more like youth-frightening. Because in these hospitals, these young girls, these young people were also meeting older women, people that would meet them at church and they would question you, what are you doing here? And all those questions that communities like to ask to young people. So we said, let's establish SRHR services that are youth-friendly, where another youth can offer the services to the other youth. And with this establishment of youth-friendly centers, we realized another problem. the increase in HIV among adolescent girls between the age of 19 to 24. When we looked into it, we found out that most of these girls were in a relationship with blessers. In Malawi, we call them blessers, but globally they are known as sugar daddies. They are in these relationships to fight poverty, and some of them just to have a good life, quote unquote. And while we wanted to bring in change to these girls, we also realized the dynamics that play in these blessed relationships. You see, these are older men that are in their 40s, in their 50s, having sexual relationships with girls that are 15, 16, 18. That means there's no power to negotiate for safe sex. That is why the HIV was just going high and high. So we partnered with UNAIDS. We made sure that we took the HIV testing services to the universities. So we had 5 universities across Blantyre, and we were able to offer HIV testing to 5,000 young people. We distributed condoms, and we started a campaign which we called Kodi, which is a very Gen Z language in Malawi, and it went viral, and a lot of young couples between the ages of 18 and 16 came for HIV testing before they engaged in sexual relationships. But the dream wasn't done yet. There was still a lot that had to be done. So while I was excited of the impact that I was making at the grassroots level, I wanted to do more. And for me to do more, it meant that I needed to do things that were beyond my community and beyond Malawi. And that is when the Atlantic Fellowship came into play. When I came to the Atlantic Fellowship, I was exposed to a lot of healthy iniquities and healthy issues that I didn't even know or considered existed, like the intersection of climate change and suicide from Asta, the power of the community's experience to transform communities from Shannon. It was just a lot of lessons. I also learned that there are systems that are shaping these problems that we face every day. I remember the Wongos, I hope I get that name right, giving us a lesson about transformation. And I've never been so challenged about how we have misused the term transformation for so long. I realized through this fellowship that the problems that Joanne stays addressing in Malawi aren't really different from what Lorraine and Nandita are tackling in Geneva and the USA. And I knew then that at this moment, my dream wasn't mine alone. We were all in this, fighting together. And while I was so hopeful that, oh my God, this is such a good fellowship, the news about the funding landscape started coming in. And it hit so hard on women's health. And I was like, what now? But I was so happy that while the world was going down in the other parts, at Atlantic Fellows, the fire was still burning. And trust me, if that news had gotten to me while I was in Malawi in my small office, I would have collapsed. But you all gave me hope that we are in this dream together. We are all passionate about seeing a different generation. I have nieces, younger, and you have children. And all of us are fighting to make sure that we are building a better world where my nieces can grow in and have a different world experience than we have had. So, thank you so much for being in my dream, because now I know that when I look to Asia, I see Yi and I see Ali fighting for health equity. When I look at Europe, I see Rua and Nandita fighting for health equity. When I look to America, I see Alina, Lauren, Dom, Anoop, and Shannon fighting for health equity. And when I look to Africa, I see myself, Joanne, Zariam, and Gafdin, and Neo fighting for health equity. And we have Gwen, Kadi, Salam, Olivia, Kate, and all the team of Atlantic Fellows fighting for the same cause. And as Kate says, when we distribute leadership in our organization, in our individual lives, change do happen. So as I forge forward in this journey with a strong back and open heart, I believe that change is possible. Thank you very much.